Hi there, welcome back. This is the fifth part of these site modelling and rendering tutorials, and we're now going to start the 3D Studio part of it. So I've got 3D Studio 2019 opened at the moment. I'm going to work in meters in the software. It seems to suit the lighting better. You don't deal with such big numbers, and also a lot of the content that comes in tends to be set in meters units as well. So customize unit setup, display unit scale, metric meters, system unit scale, 1 unit equals 1 meter. Okay, a couple of OKs there. We need to tell it where we're going to find the pictures that we're going to add to the materials. To do that, in customize, configure user paths, external files. Okay, and I'm going to be working from a USB drive with these materials, so I want to add from this PC USB. Okay, mapped test model, that will suffice. There aren't any other folders in there, so I don't need to add subpaths. So we'll click on use path and OK. Okay, then we import the DWG file. So file, import, import. And this could be, any type of model. If you've been modeling in SketchUp or whatever, pretty much the same process. Look into the desktop. Here's the file from AutoCAD. Open. It's recognized the units inside the AutoCAD drawing. It's offering me to rescale that. Okay, so keep the tick on rescale. Okay, I want to weld nearby vertices. I'm going to set a threshold there of 0.03. So it's going to give it an allowance of 300 millimeters to kind of bend the surface if it needs to join it correctly. Okay, I want it to auto smooth adjacent faces. 15 degrees would be okay. That's going to work fine for the landscape. If we set that to 30, then we'd end up with a curved roof instead, because it would look at our 30-degree slope in the roof and curve it all around, which wouldn't be too good. And a tick in Orient normals of adjacent faces. So these kind of three things kind of work together to give you a smooth surface that's all facing the same direction. Click OK. Okay, now the last model I was in, I left it sitting in the clay render. So if I put it back to default shading, this is what your model would look like when it first comes in. It's a bit difficult to read what's going on, but we can see with these coloured lines that there is some 2D line work inside the model. So these are called shapes. Now if I list the objects by name, I can see they've got different icons. The 2D stuff has got different icons. I could click it, I could select them in that method and delete them. Alternatively, you can change your filter to shapes and drag over the whole model. We've got just the shape objects now. Press delete and they go. Okay, change your filter back to all. Okay, it's a bit difficult to read the model like this with no materials on it, and that's where the clay visualizer comes in handy. At least we can see what the model looks like. Okay, I'll orbit this, just inspect it, make sure there's no obvious gaps anywhere. It's looking fine. Okay, so we want to get a basic material onto this just to get so we can see the model. So I'm using the compact materials editor. There's also one called Slate, which is a bit more sophisticated. Compact is fine for most architectural visualizations. Okay, it takes a few seconds to come in. It's pulling in lots of materials that we're not likely to use. So once we change this first one to a simple material, I'm going to copy it onto all the other slots just so it speeds up the display of the materials editor. The default view is to have just 3x2 materials showing. Okay, that takes a few seconds for that to happen. So that's usually what the editor starts off looking like. But I'm going to change that to, so using the options button here, change it to 6x4, apply, OK. As I say, it takes a few seconds for it to do that. Some quite complex materials in here. Okay, so I'll take the first one, double clicked it there so I can see it in more detail. Okay, I'm just going to rename this to white. Just caps for everything, it's easier to read. Okay, I'm going to use a preset of a matte paint and change this to an advanced setting. That way you can get control of the reflections. The base colour wants to be full strength at 1, and it wants to be white. Click the little rectangle, change this to white. Reflections 0, roughness 0. Okay, so we kind of neutralised the material completely. Okay, I'm going to close that sample. I'm going to drag that onto all the other material slots. Okay, it just speeds up the materials editor a lot if you do this. So it doesn't have to work out the reflections for all these materials. So we're halfway there already. Okay, just drag them on. Keep going. 2 more lines to do. Bing, bing, bing. And the last line. Okay, so it's much quicker for the materials editor to show up next time. So we want to put this material on everything in the scene. Okay, lots of ways you could do that. Okay, I could use the select tool, grab everything, and assign material to the selection. Alternatively, you can select everything by name, click 1, hold shift, OK, and assign to selection. A slower method is to drag the material on one by one. Just deselect there for a second. Okay, we can't see the material go on because we're still on clay, so we'll change back to default shading, and you can see this will be quite laborious and likely for you to miss an object. Okay, so that's why you use the other methods. Grab everything, assign to selection. Okay, so this is what we do. Start with white so that you've got a base situation for your lighting, so you can't really get any brighter than having everything painted white. Okay. So we need some light and we need a camera to get things initialized here. So placing the light and the camera can't really be done in the perspective viewport, so we need to go back to the 4 viewport setup. So down in the bottom right here, use the toggle button. You can see the other 4 views. Okay, so we'll use the top view for placing the light source, and we'll keep this simple and controllable, and we'll use the sun positioner. So we create a light, the sun positioner. Okay, click and drag to create the compass point. Okay, when you let go, you then are able to decide which way north is. So let's just keep it simple, go vertically. Okay, and then the final click is determining how far away from your model this thing called the sunlight head is positioned. It doesn't have to be right close to the model or very far away. It's just an icon showing the direction of the sunlight. Okay, the location and the angle of the sun, that does need adjusted because it's not going to be very realistic for Scotland. So if we go to modify and you're looking for the location, which at the moment is San Francisco, you can change this to Europe and Edinburgh, closest to us. And then you've got control of the time of day and the date. So let's go forwards to mid-afternoon, and we'll drop the month back a bit as well, so we get a bit shallower angle. Okay, we need a camera now, so we'll create a camera, and we'll go with a target camera. Okay, you click, hold, drag, and then let go. So the first click is where you want to be stood. So what I'll do, I'll stand across the road. So click, hold, drag, aim the camera. I'm kind of aiming at the corner of the house. Let go. Okay, I don't want to add another camera, so I'm going to go to the select object tool instead. I want to change from perspective view to camera view. Click the word perspective, cameras, camera 001. Okay, I'm underneath the model at the moment. If I hold the middle mouse button, I can slide the model down in relation to me. I can see now we've got the building in view. I'm not seeing very much of the scene here because it's got quite a narrow field of view. Okay, the camera's selected at the moment. If it wasn't, you need to select it so that you can edit it. Okay, so I've got my target camera. I'm looking for the lens length here. I'll go for a 24, so I get a much wider view from the same position. And along with this, we need to just go to the render setup. Okay, and determine the size in pixels of the picture we want to create. So let's change this to 1000 by 500. Okay, so that's a custom size, 1000 by 500. That proportion is 2 to 1. Okay, we need to see that 2 to 1 proportion reflected in the camera viewport. So click the word camera again and click on show save frames. So that matches the render size here to the proportion in the viewport. And otherwise you kind of end up with renders that aren't quite what you were expecting. Okay, we're using the ART renderer here, and we can decide on quality level or how long we want it to render for. So I'm going to leave it on draft just now so it's quick to render. Back to common. You need to, if you want to record the file as you go, we need to go to render output, files, save this to the desktop and call it test. And file type, I'm just going to go with JPEG just now. It's not the finished file, but it's fine for tests. And save. Choose the quality level. Okay, and hit render. I'm getting a complete whiteout here. Okay, because we haven't set the exposure control. Okay, so it doesn't know how to behave with all this light coming into the camera. So we go to rendering, exposure control. For a global exposure value, let's change this to 14 and see if that helps. Okay, always make sure the viewport you want to render is the one that's selected. more usable now. It's still extremely bright, but you can't get any brighter than everything being painted white. It's like a snowy day. Once we start adding materials, then the amount of light in the scene is going to drop dramatically, because there's less light being reflected around the scene. Okay, adjusting the exposure value. So say we went to 16 here, that's going to basically keep the camera open for a shorter amount of time. The scene should be darker. Okay, that's the general principle. Okay, but I'll put that back to 14 so that when we render next time it's ready to go. So that's the very basics of setting up the scene. We'll just put white on everything, added a light, added a camera, and set up our rendering. And the next video will cover adding materials in more detail.